we realized with predictable revenue, we thought, okay, some businesses can grow just through referrals and some can grow through an outbound strategy. But I think today you have to have an advertising arm or marketing arm, like, and it's the same, to be able to get to your customers, because all your customers are being advertised to, whether you're advertising to them or not. You need to make sure that you have a predictable strategy of driving new customers to your business. It is the fastest way to grow.
Welcome to Building Bigfoot, the podcast to grow your business profitably. I'm excited because I'm introducing Steven here. He's actually my brother, co-founder and co-CEO of StreetText. And StreetText is a platform to really grow your business with Facebook ads and Instagram ads, and to reach more clients through an acquisition funnel that you own and you build. And really, it's about performance-based marketing. So it's about effective ads that get you leads, that get you outcomes that you're looking for to grow your business. So without further ado, I want to introduce Steve. And Steve, why don't you kick it off? Share a little bit about your story. And this is going to be fun. I've never got an interview before.
So my story, any particular, where do you want me to start, I guess?
Start at the beginning. So all the way back, did you always know that you were going to be in business? Was
Okay.
entrepreneurship something like rooted in your DNA?
Yeah, 100%. I would, even when I was little, when I was younger, I think I always admired. It's funny. Even as you asked that, I connect all these memories really quickly, but there's some that really stand out. Like, I always remember the fascination of seeing. I remember like a businessman almost in an airplane, like that kind of initially connects, where I just kind of felt like they were like, you were just doing big things and on an adventure and going places. And I think that was one thing that I really liked. But it was more than, it wouldn't necessarily mean that you were working for someone. It was like that you were that you were on a trip to sort of uncover something or find something or figure something out. And another kind of analogy that comes to mind that isn't really an entrepreneur, but like the kind of like the James Bond persona, if you will, of like working kind of on big challenging tasks, saving the world. But I would definitely would feel like, I mean, maybe it's not the best analogies, but like, though, if you combine those two together, I guess there was a sense in me always of like just the adventure of business. I always saw myself in that kind of environment, and not just in the same environment every single day, kind of like punching the clock, if you will. And so pretty early on, I would start asking. I remember asking my mom questions just in regards to like work or business, or and she would do her best to teach me, or kind of like I guess kind of prod me in that direction of that entrepreneurship. And yeah, and so I think early on, I just kind of always had the desire. I remember, um, I remember asking my mom a lot in regards to like what people would make or how much money you made. And I would ask my mom even how much money our parents made, because I think I was also trying to build a little bit of a model in my head in regards to what was capable, and what was sort of like what are the, I think you can't help but almost like you start to create these benchmarks and say, if this is what I see in your life and this is what you make, well, then I need to make more than that if I'm going to have some of the things that I desire or want, right? And I think like it maybe coming back to James Bond a little bit, the James Bond kind of like character is filled with like fancy gadgets, really cool cars, like just things that you can't put a price on any of those things, if you know what I mean. Like when you're going to go, when you're going into those sort of environments, it's really about, just being able to put all these incredible resources together. And, this just sounds funny, but this last weekend, I was invited to an event. And it's actually a winery here in the Okanagan that I didn't even know existed. And all of that James Bond stuff would have existed, if you will, like huge, hundreds of millions of dollar like facility. I won't mention the name, but like incredible place. People showing up in James Bond style, very fancy cars, guys landing in a helicopter. we're in a private tour. So I think there was maybe that's a perfect example of it all coming together a little bit. And then I'm chatting to the guy who owns the helicopter, and he says, "Oh, if you're interested, I'll take you up, and you can fly it around a little bit." And I'm like, "Oh, this is incredible. Absolutely, I would." Right. So I don't know. That was a very interesting way of talking about entrepreneurship. But I would just say that there's definitely a part of me always that's just fascinated by just I guess what's possible. Um, yeah, yeah,
That's pretty cool. So for you, it's really about crafting and opening up the kind of life that can be possible through entrepreneurship that maybe is not possible or as easily accessible through other avenues. And so it's like navigating like what direction is going to really create that life.
yeah, yeah. Well, as I talk about that, I'm thinking to myself a little bit. It's not actually that I even care about the money. I think I just am more fascinated with what experience is possible, right? Or what you can do. Okay. The other thing with James Bond, going back to this for a second, it was always really clear to me that this guy was on a solo mission, but he was supported by an enormous team, a team of like really interesting people that were providing like crazy skill sets, right, to make things happen. And together they could take on these monster challenges and literally save the world, right? And so I think that was another thing that stood out to me too. Is like if you want to do really cool things in life and you want to take on some big problems, you're going to need to surround yourself with an incredible team. And you all get to participate and partake in that incredible adventure when you work together like that. So I think that was another thing that I found interesting about entrepreneurship is just, when you combine a bunch of different talents together and a bunch of different people together, you can take on really, really big challenges or, take on big problems. So yeah, even it really isn't even about the money. It's about the size of the problem that you're taking on and what that can look like when you take it on. Like, what can be the outcome of that, or what can the adventure be like when you work on that together. So I would say that even when I talk about this last weekend, for me, it's more of just again witnessing in the real world kind of all of those things kind of playing out and seeing like all of these people are incredible people that are doing exactly sort of likewise, and then even them working together, they can take on some interesting challenges. So it's I think for my brain, it's just fun to kind of see it kind of playing out.
So I mean, like you're a naturally curious person, and I can see. So our dad is very much a like scientific brain, very analytical. He loves to think, loves to research. He's constantly sharing the latest research that he's learning, and it's neat actually to hear how you are applying that to life in a way. It's like you're curious. You're meeting people. You're like, okay, tell me a little bit about that. Like, I'm like, how did you get the helicopter, or what does it take to have that helicopter scenario, the James Bond scenario? And then there's another piece that you're sharing, which I think is interesting, which is you're clearly more drawn to the Mission Impossible or James Bond type teams, where you know that there's a team working together versus Jason Bourne, who's a solo guy on a solo mission, um, and he doesn't necessarily need a team. He's just this guy who's kind of independent and is doing his own thing. Whereas for you, you're like, okay, um, how do we collaborate in a way where everybody gets to participate and win in this adventure? And so for you, what's like the thing that's most exciting to you right now when you kind of look outwards a little bit? Maybe it's the James Bond technology, maybe it's what's happening in the space. What is it that fascinates you, and like especially in regards to technology?
Yeah, so obviously, just sticking on that theme a little bit. We really are living in sort of that world, that environment now, right? Where, especially just even right now, like obviously with AI, right? I think AI represents you. You almost can't even make I was actually thinking about this the other day. I don't even know if you can make the movies that we could have made in the last little while. Like you're gonna have to start pushing the envelope a little bit, because I feel like all the movies that were made of AI, right, were of kind of what it's possible right now, and we're already well beyond that. Like in other words, you could and back to James Bond. I mean, he'd wear glasses that could like maybe they had a camera in them, right? And they could record a conversation or identify people or voices. Well, all of that's possible, but it's not just possible for the military or for the Secret Service, but it's possible for the average consumer, like the average developer that's super smart and can access a bunch of this different technology. I mean, it's not that far away. If we wanted to start a company today, you and I, and wanted to lean into that technology, we could probably create, I mean, it takes a bit of money, but you could have a prototype out pretty fast of something like that, right? Like it's not all of that stuff's within reach. And even for my own mind, I was actually, sometimes I just play around with like different scenarios or of things that can happen. I mean, another one that could be totally terrifying is you see these videos of robotics and how they move and jump, and and you instantly, all the movies come to mind of recent that you see where it's pretty terrifying, and you're living in a not a very futuristic world from today. It seemed futuristic, but it could be right now, where you've got a group of survivors being chased down or hunted down by a bunch of robots. And then you combine those robots with what's even available in AI today, and you're like, they would never make it. Like in the movie, they're able, like the technology is not that smart, or there's like these huge gaps. Uh, everybody would have to run around with like an EMP device of some sort that they could like, you would need that because, uh, so that if that makes sense. So I think, and I'm talking about more like sort of doomsday sort of scenarios, but I mean they all tie into James Bond. Like keeping on that theme, like all of those movies would almost seem too realistic if you made them today. You got to stretch the envelope a little bit, and I'm kind of wondering what that is. Like, what is the next envelope? Because even the Matrix and all those things that we grew up on, and all these different movies, I mean, the Terminators, right? Like all that iconic stuff that really kind of predicted what scenarios like today could look like. It's all here now. And the next 3 to 5 years, I think you almost have to brace yourself for what's coming. Like it's going to be a much more intense curve than I think most people are anticipating. And sorry, so with all that in mind, like what is, when the futuristic thinkers that wrote those and created those movies, 20 years ago, some of them, or even just like the Matrix concept, what's next? Like, what are they going to be thinking about? Because I'm like, what is that? Like, what is the next? Because we're here. We're in like the future of futures, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I was listening to the Boston Dynamics CEO in an interview, and he was saying the funny thing is that he's actually really scared of ChatGPT, but he's not at all scared of robotics. And I think the irony there is, like, as a human nature, we look at stuff like AI or robotics, and the thing that terrifies us is the thing that we don't understand or we don't know. It's usually the fear of the unknown. And he was saying there's a lot of safety like protocols and mechanisms getting put into robotics, but the reality is I'm not scared of AI through Chat GPT at all. It doesn't terrify me at all. The idea that somebody might or that AI might be starting to craft like media and news articles and putting it out there through the different channels, and we wouldn't be able to tell the difference. Well, ChatGPT is taking the already existing human content, repurposing it, and putting it out. So none of the content that it would be putting out wouldn't exist already. Whereas with like Boston Dynamics, the robotics, you're facing a real threat. Like, what if the robot and ChatGPT merge, and now you have this intelligent robot that has decided uh, that it wants to restrain people for their own safety? That kind of thing terrifies me. And the strength of those robots is insane. Like if you watch the videos and how much um, power those machines are created to have based on their motors and their workings, it's impressive but terrifying. But what he was saying, he was saying that the future is going to be in the job landscape, especially in Europe, where there's a huge migration of workers that are moving out of the jobs that they used to be in, and The problem is that the European population isn't growing fast enough to sustain the workforce. And so they need a workforce of robots to be able to continue to provide the quality of life that we've all kind of come to know and love. And Tesla is saying that they think they're going to be able to have robots out this year or next year. And so that's another big mover. And their whole plan is to get household robots so that you're going to have, yes, they'll have machines that will work on the factory floor, but their goal is to have somebody or a robot that's now in your kitchen. And then of course they also want to work on AI. So that's even doubly terrifying. But yeah, so it's a brave new world.
Yeah, and I actually am really, not terrified of it. Um, you mentioned AI and robotics mixed together. I would actually be much more concerned if I was to play on the fear side for one last minute. It would be much more, like you think about iRobot, and then they got all these robots, and you think it's linked to a person, but it's ultimately linked to like this like machine that's at the center that's trying to like take over the humans and whatnot. And I think, I mean, obviously there's a possibility there, but I think that's less likely. I'd be much more terrified of a government agency controlling the robots in a sense, or something like human control, because like it's just there'd be so much power in like in other words, the point is if a robot's chasing you and it's intelligent and it has like an objective and it's got all the resources available, you're not going to get away from it. I mean, you couldn't even hide from the military today if you wanted to. You see those movies where people are running through the woods and they're getting, you wouldn't get away. And but you add the robots to it and it's game over. But I actually don't think that's really the scenario that I think is likely. And I mean obviously I don't know the future, but for me I get much more excited about what you were just talking about. What will the productivity mean for the world with robotics and AI? And they're kind of coming out together at the same time. Like robotics has been in production, like, or working for a long time, and AI, obviously there's been a lot of work on it, but like you get in the consumer side of it now. We don't really have a consumer side of the robotics, but we have a lot of machines already that are like a robotic machine. Maybe they're not like moving around all on their own, but some of them are. Like some of those machines in the factories are still wheeling themselves around, lifting and taking specific barcodes and inventory and moving them around in the warehouses. And so a lot of that is actually out there. It's just been more on the I guess the business side, not necessarily consumer side. But I get like excited because we're entering this interesting era. If you ever follow, and I'll just speak about it for a moment because it's just on my mind a little bit. Like if you follow a guy like Ray Dalio, and he's kind of like showing these big debt cycles and these big kind of like world changing world order cycles, and where we're at today, we're kind of at the cusp of like a big cycle change of some sort. And yet you could never have predicted robotics and AI. And so what drives more productivity creates huge value. Like if you can, like, you think about just basic economics, like productivity is the number one driver of like wealth, right? Like if you can create productivity in an economy, you can create enormous value and enormous wealth. And so what does AI and robotics mean if you can get it out fast? Like, does it almost change that whole variable in where we're at today? Like we are in a bit of a precarious position, and maybe it doesn't, but I wonder about that. Like, what if you could have a robot in your house that could do your house cleaning, could mow your lawn, could maybe at the future even pick up groceries? Like, and I mean, you can even have groceries delivered today, but you could just the robot could. I mean, I guess AI could actually already execute on the grocery orders for you, and then it's just going to show up at your house. And maybe you even have a robot that takes those groceries and puts them into your fridge, or this, like, if I think about, I I've got a lot better in the last number of years of hiring some things out. I still do, a bunch of things, but there's a lot of things that my time is filled up. Like even if you're just maintaining a home, vehicles, all that kind of stuff, there's actually quite a bit of your life that goes into that stuff. And we're pretty good about getting it done. Like you're kind of working around, even if you have friends coming over, well, I got to quickly put the pool cleaner in, and then I got to go do this thing and do that thing, and you're kind of getting ready. But what if a robot could do all of that? And to me, that's actually really exciting. Like I think, and now that's one kind of productivity, but I still think that would save the average consumer a lot of time. But what if like, so many kind of tedious tasks were completely eliminated, and everybody, even in a company, you wouldn't have to do them. Like, we're one of the things that we need to consider, obviously, is like hiring more like research assistants or assistants for some of our team members. What if AI could come in and just eliminate so many of those administrative stuff that bogs down everybody in every role? Everybody has tasks that come up where it's more work for you to find somebody to do the task than just to do the task yourself. So you just do the task. Where if you could have a really good AI model, like an example would be, I was just helping our sales team migrate over to a new CRM, and it was just easier for me to go through and audit a bunch of the data and clean it up myself and move it over for them, because I really want them focusing on what they're doing. But it's not really the best use of my time either. I don't want to have to, like, it's going to take me way too long to find somebody. So I spent like almost 3 days solid on just doing that. Like it, and I did leverage AI slightly in it, but and I used it more for like formulas for like my Excel sheets that I was, Google Sheets. But what if you could just give it the task and it would just do it? That kind of stuff gets me really excited.
Yes, and I was even thinking like landscaping. You imagine you could just like use AI.
Yeah.
Well, not just weeds, but like
Weeds.
what
Oh,
if you had a
goodness.
picture in your backyard and you're like, oh, if only you could create this. You go to AI and you say, generate a super
Oh,
cool
that.
looking backyard landscape that gets uploaded into the brain of the robot, and then you just have the dump
Yeah.
trucks drop off the rocks and the sand and the gravel. You come back 2 days later, and there's your robot just picking up the rocks, putting them where they need to be, and then all of a sudden your landscaping is complete. I think that could be game changing.
That's actually very interesting. I mean, I totally agree. I mean, all of that is possible.
Or
And
actually,
that's a
it's possible today, like with the way that they've designed those robots. They have
but
such amazing balance.
but it's like a convergent of possibilities. Like, you have, obviously the robot could do it, but the robot could execute, because we know that we could properly, with all the other technology we have, like we could 100% actually, properly grid that out and make sure that we have like a real 3D model of what it's going to look like. You could even see the progress real time. So yeah, I agree. I think I didn't even think of that. That would be
Or or
incredibly powerful.
or the housing affordability crisis is largely a constraint of demand and or of supply. And so I
Because
used to
robots
work.
build houses.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I used to be in construction, and so I understood like the process of building a house. But you could literally have the plans installed in the brain of a robot. It can use its hands as everything from screwdrivers, drills, able to move all the lumber, cut it, saw it, and just go to work. And it could work 24 hours a day, within maybe the limits of public policy. So maybe we say these are the quiet hours, and then that robot now can build houses for way cheaper, because the
Oh
number
yeah.
one cost of production when it comes to homes is not the raw materials, it's the labor. The labor cost is the most expensive part.
Well, and time, you would be able to shrink time as well. It's interesting you say that, because a big, in the last few years, a big thing on was 3D printing, and like, hey, we could 3D print a house. And a 3D printed house essentially is just removing a lot of labor, like to your point, with a massive robot that's printing. But as much as it's like cool, and as much as what it does, it's kind of ugly. Like, like the core of and it's sort of rigid. Like, you have to be able to like have a continual 3D printed uh kind of, what's the word, like a medium, like maybe it's concrete or something that you're kind of pouring in. But that is robotics at play, to your point. But if you could have a little bit more flexibility with your robots, and like have this design and they execute on it perfectly. Also, to your point, I hadn't even thought about this, but like one of the things on a job site is how much waste is there. Huge waste. When you're building and you're measuring and you're cutting, like, you, you're thinking it through, and a good builder is thinking it through. But at the end of the day, they're not optimizing for waste, so they're not thinking about each board they cut. But a robot could have every little bit of lumber, that's even all the inventory that's on site, in its mind, as it's operating, and it already knows every board it's going to cut and what length and what to use and all the upcoming pieces it'll need in the future. A human just can't calculate that. Not only could they not calculate in the day, they just can't keep making those calculations as they're moving through the job. Like, you could probably get way more efficient, use less material. You could even use other material from that site on other sites because you know what they'll need on those sites. Like, a human brain could never know that. Like, you know what I mean?
Yes, I know exactly what you're saying. And what is it? They looked at the calories burnt by the world's best chess players, and in during the chess matches, the world's best chess players were burning something like 6,000 calories, which is as many calories as a Tour de France cyclist burns in a on a day of the Tour de France, which is nuts. And that's just from focus and thinking. And so it just shows how much resources it takes to concentrate and to really think through all those problems. Whereas for like a computer, that type of thinking is actually pretty easy. It's very, very good at it. Where humans are much better at. We're really good at pulling ideas together, and we're really good at coming up with creative ideas, things that didn't exist previously, or being able to problem solve. And that's probably the reason we've gotten to where we are today as a society, is because we're good at problem solving, and we can collaborate and work together as a society and come up with collective solutions. Yeah, this is so. So let's like dial it back a second.
Well, can I say one last thing to it, just as we shift gears, because I know we need to for time. What you just said there is interesting. It's something I haven't put a lot of thought into. The AI is so incredible because you're so right. Like, what makes humans so special, and we don't necessarily like, I think I know where it comes from, but we get these insights and we get these ideas that then we can make possible. And entrepreneurship is just that, but that plays out in many, many ways. Like, somebody can walk by and see a bunch of like homeless kids and suddenly take action on that scenario, and within a few years has built up this incredible program that raises tens or hundreds of millions of dollars to solve that problem. But it was like something that it was just, they saw it in their brain and they needed to solve it, and everything came around that because the vision is so powerful. And as humans, we are way better at the ideation, and some of that we work on ourselves, and sometimes these ideas just pop in your brain, and then machines can execute on that. The execution can be quite hard, and so it'll be almost even more fun. And I really don't think that the machines are gonna do that. Like, however smart it gets, it'll get, like, I think there's something truly, truly special about a human that people have to worry less about when they think about all this cool technology. It'll actually be better because though those insights, those incredible visions that come in our minds are human. That's human. That's not a machine thing. And I know it's not a machine thing because of the disconnect. Sometimes what idea comes in your head, there's no path to it based on the current. It's not even like you're solving a problem. You have an insight in something that never even existed in your mind prior. Like, you don't even know where it comes from. And that, I think, is pretty special and what makes a human unique. So anyways, we can shift gears. I just wanted to close on that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like, I remember watching the documentary. I think it was the Brooklyn Bridge. It might have been the Brooklyn Bridge. It might have been the Manhattan Bridge. And the guy that was working on it back in the 1800s, he said something profound, which is it only took 3 weeks to design this. Like, he obviously he was working pretty hard at it, but to design the schematics and the engineering for it. But that created work for years for thousands of men, because the execution, the ideation part is relatively, like, we're naturally good at that. But it's like, you can have an idea, but then actually seeing that idea come to fruition takes a ton of execution. And that's usually the part where, if ever there's going to be, like, the world's best teams, they're great at execution, and they're great at execution as a team. The world's best everything, it comes down to the quality of that execution. So uh, so shifting gears slightly, uh, before you started StreetText's, before you tell me a little bit about your journey. So, like, you've got this idea, you got this inkling. Where do you just know straight off the bat what it is that you're going to do and what you're going to pursue? How do you get to the place where you're starting to create business?
Yeah. So going back to kind of like we were just being a little silly there talking about James Bond and stuff, but uh, nonetheless, obviously a seed was planted, and I knew I wanted to do, I guess, my own thing, if you will. And so, I go through high school, and when I'm graduating high school, our mom is incredible, and she is making sure that I'm going to pick something. Like what our mom cared about more than anything else, and you remember, was like some sort of post-secondary degree, right? She just wanted to make sure she could get her kids to a point where they had something to fall back on. She'd often say that, and I really appreciate that in her. She definitely just wanted to make sure that we were pushing to at least that point, and then we could take it from there. But I remember the only two things that I was interested in, or when we went through this, we had a book. I was looking at the university in Kelowna. It was actually the college at that time, but I was looking through all the courses, and the only two that really stood out to me were computer science and business. And throughout that journey, I realized really quickly when I would speak to somebody, like my orthodontist would be working on my teeth, but what I was really fascinated with was the life that he could build out of it. And it seemed like that was the path to get there. So I was considering even that for a little bit, but even with that, it became clear to me I wasn't really interested in becoming a dentist or an orthodontist. I was more interested in the business side of what he was doing. And so it was business, but obviously I had this really strong inclination towards computer science too, because at that time, if you remember when we were younger, I'd take computers apart and put them back together with our dad. And I was really fascinated with, just back then we were working on like DOS. I remember when Windows came out, but it was really hardware based. You're doing a lot of like hardware, upgrading your hard drive, or like thinking about just how excited I was when you could get a little bit more RAM in your computer, and all those kinds of things are gone today, in terms of like just the power. But anyways, all that to say, I was fascinated with how computers work. And so those are the two choices: going to university, and I'm studying business. But I remember they would always, in the program I was in, they were kind of always trying to put you into a lane. So fairly early on, like, do you want to be a manager? Do you want to be an accountant? Do you want to be like a financial planner? Do you want to be like on the investment side? Do you want to be an economist, right? Like there's all these kind of like different lanes a little bit. And I was interested in all of them, and definitely didn't want to be defined by any of them, if that makes sense. So I remember I really struggled on it, and because it was interesting to me that certain personality types, they 100%, I want to be a manager. I want to go for a manager role. I'm thinking about applying for co-op positions as soon as I can with the manager title. And that terrified me. Like I had absolutely no interest in that. Like zero, zippo. Like I remember even thinking there was something wrong. Like what is missing is I have no direction. I just want to take all the studies and be very general at it. I mean, even the law, we studied some business law, which I found so fascinating. But I knew I did not want to be a lawyer, but I wanted to know how the law worked. And so, anyways, that was kind of like that journey. I took all the general studies. The most interesting to me was the finance side. So I leaned a little bit more on that and the accounting side. Graduated university with no job because I had no job in mind, but it coincided with a man that I had met, and he was a commercial real estate developer, and he was sort of somebody that was in my kind of like network, if you will, through church. I had seen him and I admired him, and I literally just went up to him and said to him, "I will work for you for free if you can teach me what it is that you do and how you do it." And so, here I am coming to university with zero income mind. Like maybe I said, it's not really about the money. Like I didn't really care about the money. I was more focused on like the learning and the skills. And so anyways, I go to work for this guy, and literally he was paying me zero. And then he started paying me $1,000 a month. And for the $1,000 a month, he was actually a student of that mentality, if you will. So he saw no problem in paying me very little, because he actually would say to me, "What I'm going to teach you is much more valuable than what I'd be paying you." And I learned a lot from him, but I also did a lot of mediocre things. I picked up his kids from school. Sometimes I was literally his assistant, but he gave me huge responsibility very quickly. I was renoing, which I didn't want to be doing either. We were buying these commercial buildings, and I was literally demoing them. But then before I knew it, I was with him on this franchise side, and we were putting in franchises. He put me in charge of seeing the whole projects from a PM standpoint the whole way through. And then he put me in charge of running the businesses, hiring the people, and then making these businesses profitable, which is a pretty extensive set of skills when I look back, like that was a pretty big ask for somebody coming out of university that had zero experience and zero understanding of how our business actually operates, other than the theory. So, anyways, I worked for him for a while doing that. It was an incredible opportunity. The challenge a little bit with that scenario was I didn't realize at the time that this particular individual had some. I guess nobody's going to know who it was, but and it's public anyways. But this individual was manic. So I went away on a trip. I remember I went back to Africa, and because that's where we're from. We're immigrated from South Africa. So I'd gone on this trip, and there I was just dreaming about like the next wave with this particular individual and company. Like I just saw a future there. Like the stuff we were working on was only ever expanding, and even though I was working with someone, it was I think this exists a lot in companies that people don't realize. There was entrepreneurship. There was tons of entrepreneurship within this company, within this opportunity, right? Like there were no limitations placed on what was possible. And so I was very excited. I came back, but when I came back, it had like burned down. It was we were suddenly running into money problems. This individual was not the same person. They had over leveraged themselves on some personal stuff. We were selling buildings. It was just crazy. And so, anyways, that was another side to witness. But I ended up, because I was doing the commercial leasing as part of also the this building stuff, I had to become a real estate agent. I didn't want to become a real estate agent, but I became a real estate agent as part of the process. And I remember even doing that. I actually had sold our parents' home. Like they needed some help selling their home, and they wanted to do it actually at that time by themselves. But I was their agent. I helped them do it. I created all the contracts. I sold it for them basically. I did the buyer stuff. I brought people through the property. And so when everything kind of crashed, and I ran into a personal injury, I'd broken my ankle really badly in a motorcycle accident. And so, anyways, I remember when it all crashed and burned down, I had a real estate license and a broken leg. And I started going around to some of the, I started phoning some agents in Kelowna, and I ended up meeting a guy named Wade Webb at Royal LePage. And as soon as I chatted with him, it was just, I knew I was going to work there for a while. And so long story short, I became a real estate agent. And I have to admit, like for any real estate agents, because we work with thousands of realtors. I mean, I never knew my life was going to involve working with so many real estate agents. But I never could have imagined some of the really cool things that would come out of being a realtor. Like I would say I was a reluctant real estate agent. I didn't want to be one necessarily, because I wanted to do this other commercial development stuff. Like this was not part of the plan. But when I did it, I met incredibly interesting people. I learned a ton. It opened up a lot of, you just work on really interesting deals. And very quickly, because of my skill set, I was doing commercial deals as well as residential deals. And I found it really fascinating. Anyway, so fast forward through that. This is where it gets kind of cool. This is before apps, 2007, 2006, maybe somewhere in that neighborhood or somewhere in there. I don't know how much time we have. We're going to go really fast here. But, I ended up having this idea that all these real estate agents were running open houses. But open houses, there was no way to drive traffic to the open house other than you'd have to have your open house signs. And there was no website for open houses back then, and it was hard. And so I remember having this, I thought it was this really good idea. I remember having you and mom over, I think, to one of my open houses, and I was pitching this idea, and you were like, oh, that's really cool.
Oh, so what's funny about this is that the pain was so obvious because you're sitting at this open house, you're in this neighborhood, you I think it was a townhouse at the time. Nobody was coming in, and you're like, I placed the advertisement in a newspaper, but you have no eyes on if somebody saw it, how many people saw it, like only if they pick up the phone and call you, but who's ever going to do that? So it's this black box, and you have no way of measurably knowing how many people are going to show up to your open house. There has to be a better way. There has to be a better way of marketing open houses and running open houses. I remember you sharing that with me, and I'm thinking, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I could see the wheels in your mind were starting to turn as you had all this time hosting this open house.
Well, and just from a date standpoint, it's interesting you say that. It's a good reminder. That wasn't my only advertising was in the newspaper. So just think about that, how much has changed even between then and now. But I could only advertise an open house in a newspaper, and I had to do it I think it was at least almost 10 days prior, or maybe up to a week But after that, it was in production or print. Like you couldn't, if you decided you want to do an open house on Friday, but it happened to be Wednesday, you're out of luck. Like the best thing you can do is put your signs up. There was no like last minute open house advertising. It did not exist. So big, clear problem. So anyways, we have this idea and I start getting excited about it. And so I start researching names and I am horrified to see that because we live in a city called Kelowna, that Open House Kelowna already existed. And somebody had the exact same idea as I did. So I was horrified to see this. And back then, like, you just think so differently, right? So you think like, it can only be one. And maybe there could have only been one, but that's like exactly how you think. But I went down, found out who it was, and it was a guy named Art Bosma. And he was in my office, like he was in my real estate office, and I didn't even know who he was. But this guy couldn't believe it. He had stolen my idea, and he was in my office or whatever. But being that entrepreneur again, you like get on the phone and you reach out to him. I think I emailed him, or I forget how we made contact. Anyways, it turns out Art is the nicest guy you could ever meet. Truly an incredible entrepreneur of his own. He has more ideas than he brought Bitcoin to us when it was nothing. And I don't even mean nothing. It had never even got a publication yet. Like it was nothing. And he was talking about
this is before there was such a thing as online. You couldn't even trade it. Like the only way you could get it was if you had a wallet installed on your computer, and then you
yeah.
had to manually make the transfer.
It was so technically difficult at that point. Like hardly anybody was using it, just some developers, and Art brought it to us. Like that's the kind of, he is so early on things and like has that mind. Anyways, I meet Art, talk to him. He's so amazing, so nice, so generous, like just so open to work together. And I ended up buying into this little business. I forget how much I paid. It's probably like $2,500. Maybe it was 5,000. It was somewhere in that neighborhood. I like buy in. And so Art and I become partners. And I buy 50% of the company. And we don't have a dream for just Open House Kelowna. We want like all the neighboring cities and then eventually like Canada. And we get all excited about this. And but we ran into a really interesting snag pretty quick, which was, who's going to build all this stuff for us? Like who's going to code all this stuff for us? And we got all these dreams, and we can't afford a coder, and we're like real estate agents. But I'm like, oh, but John, he's in school, and he's been teaching himself. This Jonathan on the call, my brother, is been teaching himself some stuff, and I saw some website stuff that he was creating. So after maybe Art and I had worked together for a few months, I figured how long it was. It wasn't that long. We then go to John, and we pitch to John like this new journey, this new adventure of these open house cities and what it can mean. We run the revenue numbers, and I think we got you interested, right? Like, and actually, was open house or was Centuria resales? Was that before that? Kind of like within that mix, because that's a whole nother story.
We had already done Centuria resales at this point.
Okay, so yeah, then just briefly talk about that. I get this commercial. Oh no, we don't get. So I think it was Art and I, or I decided, or me and this other realtor had decided. Sorry, this is right in the middle of all the story, but it's important that we had decided that we wanted to like canvas this new construction building. And so we created a website for it, which I think was, again, very unique. Like we decided to we were going to be the experts in this building. And I don't know if anybody was really doing it. Again, this is newspaper days, but we create an early website of this building. We want to make sure that everybody knows that we're the realtors for it, even though we had no listings in there and we were nobody. But we couldn't figure out how to get it out there. So we worked with John to create a quick website called Centuria Resales. And we got all this print material for it, these flyers, and we got into the building and we like just stuck them under all the doors. And the building was still being pre-sold by the developer. And I got a phone call as like a 21-year-old or 22-year-old, or maybe it was 23. I forget exactly my age. Oh no, maybe it was 24. Somewhere, anyway, somewhere in that neighborhood, I get this call from a guy and he says, I don't know if I should sue you or work with you. And I was like, huh? And then I was like, oh shoot, like did I break a rule? Anyways, he was the developer. Actually, he was the son of the developer, but they worked very closely together of this Centuria building. And it's like they were out of Alberta and they did many construction units. They were like huge pockets, very wealthy people. And they were building all these buildings. And one of them was Centuria, which was like a flagship building of that time in Kelowna. Like it was the number one building. And but he was obviously impressed with my marketing. He wanted to meet me, and I think it was Lori at the time. So he meets with us, and we end up getting all of the remaining inventory. Our Centuria resale site actually takes off. He loved it. He thought it was genius from a marketing standpoint. And we start getting so not only were we getting the new inventory in the building, but we were getting the resales like as we had hoped, because people believed we were the experts in the building. So people that had bought, that wanted an our sell, were contacting us, and we were putting all these listings on the website. So anyways, I knew John could code. This website was a huge success. So I pitched that, showed that to Art as well. Art said, okay, I think we should work with John. We pitched open house cities to John. John buys in. He's excited. But he didn't buy it with cash. This is again back to how generous Art is. We just split the company now 3 ways, right? Because John was going to do all this heavy lifting for us. He was going to put on all his sweat equity skills that we didn't have. We just redivided it, and off we went. And that was, I know you probably want to chime in so much here. Maybe what I'll do is I'll just fast forward a couple of scenarios, and then you can or interrupt me. Open house cities, we ended up raising a friends and family round for this. We ended up hiring a few people, and we went for it. Like, we went to try to build this out, and it would have had legs maybe, but the internet was right there. Apps were right there. It was kind of like an in-between bridge, that, oh shoot, I feel like I'm going to sneeze right now. So, oh man. So anyways, it was right there, but we had all these real estate agents, and then we come up with a new idea. And the new idea came out of me and Lori actually being at a listing this one time, I think. And we were like, we were leaving a listing, and a client was asking us, like, how much is that home over there worth? We didn't know. We'd have to go back to the office and check it out. Or if we had all the listings printed out ahead of time in a binder, which is like super painful to do. We're like, wouldn't it be cool if you could like text? You could see the sign, you could text for information on that property and get it. And so we came back to the office, pitched that to John, and we created StreetText. And StreetText was a company that would enable real estate agents in Canada through a short code to use their phone to text for information on listings and get all of that information back on their phone. And again, we just thought, brilliant, like, this is going to be so amazing. We priced it at $15 a month. And it was our first company. Not actually, John, you have a whole nother story in this. You can talk about your clothing company. So for you, it wasn't a physical company. But for us, it was the first physical company and digital, because for the product to work for real estate agents, we actually had to physically make these real estate signs and ship them to you. And it only worked if you both had the technology and you put these signs up on your listings. And now all of a sudden, as people drove by, they could text for information. And then we got into QR codes, and we thought that was so revolutionary. Put all these QR codes on our signs, and we just thought it was amazing. But it was a really hard slog, because you had to teach realtors why they needed it or get them to want it. Then you had to teach them literally how to do it. Like, I remember we would be on the phone on a demo, and we would try to teach them, okay, now you're going to go to your phone, you're going to text this number. No, you got the number backwards. Like, you need to put the short code in first. What's a short code? And then you got to text this number in to do the demo, but they would like get them backwards. And then eventually they'd push the button right and it would work, and then they'd get information about a listing. But sometimes that would take like half an hour, just that part. And we were selling a $15 a month product over the phone. We knew no unit economics. We didn't understand it. We were really excited to get people to prepay for 6 months or 1 year. But we're talking like $90 to prepay. And anyways, all that to say, it was a nice to have product. I envisioned we'd have 1,000 to 10,000 customers in no time. It didn't work that way. But we learned a ton through it. And I remember we were running out of our friends and family round. We had hired a few people for it. We had actually revenue on it. We had made a bunch of sales, and it was cool to see our signs across Canada. Like, we had signs in Toronto. I remember driving out to the island once and seeing signs out there. We were in Vancouver, and I would see these, like, that's us. I remember being in Vernon, and a friend of mine owned a big steel, like this container company. And like, there was a home that was being sold, and people had the containers in the yard, which was his company. And I was with him in the car, and they had the sign of StreetText's up on they had used to sell the property. And that was my company. I'm like, how is that? That's amazing, even of itself, and how cool that was. But we struggled to get it really to scale. Again, how much time we got here, but I'll just keep telling the story really quick. We end up working with this one real estate agent, and because a few realtors would say to us, this is like 2014 now. And we like street text. We like that people are texting for information, but how can I get more of it? How can we get more people texting? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I can't force people to put their phone number, and I can't force people to, want to do that. And that was like, but I'd been watching Facebook advertising, and it was just when Facebook ads had gone from the ads on the side to having ads in the news feed. I needed to figure out how it worked. And so I spent some time researching and figuring it out, and I felt like there was something there. And I'd seen a couple real estate ads, and I thought, oh, this could work. We had these real estate agents, and they were saying to us they wanted a bit more leads. And I convinced this local realtor to give us $500 because we had no money of our own in the company anymore. Like we had basically run out all the friends and family money. John and I were paying ourselves nothing. Like back then we felt, I thought I was making no money with that other guy. When you start your own company, we were making like no money. And anyways, it was definitely a tough slug, and we were learning a lot, kind of those early days of entrepreneurship. So I had this realtor, and he gave me $500. And with that $500, I could use it to advertise. And so I just went to town on Facebook, and we tried this and we tried that. And we were trying ideas while still, running the other company, but we were trying this. But it also just so happened that I had bought I'd owned real estate previous, but it was our first house. I just got married. And that's a whole nother story in and of itself. Like, talk about feeling like you're getting married and you're like a failure when your company is so close to like the end. And, all the family are like, they refer to you as like this, like, wow, Steve's an entrepreneur. And I mean, that's a whole nother podcast we can do. Just like, you're trying so hard, but yet inside you feel like this just, it's just a house of cards. It could just crash any minute, right? And so I bought this house. My wife and I bought this house. We were renovating it, and we were renovating it urgently and quickly, and it was requiring money because our daughter, our first child, our daughter was about to be born. And we had all this reno work to get done. And literally the company is it's past the 11th hour. Like, for John and I, we're not making ourselves any money. It was declining. And it was really hard, super hard. And so, I got this money where we're advertising it, and literally nothing's working. I'm spending all the money on Facebook, and this is true today. It will happily take your money. It was happily going to take my money then. It will happily take your money today, whether you get results or not. And it was a Sunday morning, and I had been pulling in our kitchen. We had the subfloor, and they had like glue, and they didn't just staple the subfloor to the kitchen floor. They had glued it as well. And so it was just a horrible job. Like, you're trying to get, it's like breaking off in pieces like this big, right? And it's like the particle board, and it's just leaving this huge mess. And it was really frustrating. And so I decided to take a break. I went to Starbucks. I think I had maybe like $50 left of this guy's money. Nothing had worked. And I had tried one more ad idea. I tried this last ad idea in Starbucks. Remember, I ran it, pushed it out, launched on Facebook, drove home. I'm in my phone. Because we had no furniture in the house. Like the house was just like a complete like construction site. I put it on the ground, not on the subfloor, but on like the other part of like the living room floor. But there's no carpet or anything. So if your phone vibrates, you feel it. And I always have my phone on silent, like it's just, but on vibration mode. And so here I am back on the subfloor, working away, painful. And my phone, like I could feel it vibrating. And I thought someone was just trying to get a hold of me, but I just wanted to get what I was doing done. But it kept vibrating. Like it just kept, I remember looking over and I could see like, just like it would light up. And I thought I could see all these messages on it, and it was maybe like 10 feet from me. Finally, I stood up and went over there. And what I had done, the way I had set it up was that if I generated a lead for this real estate agent, I would send myself a notification, and it would show like a text notification. It would say new lead. And literally my phone was covered in like new leads. It was just new lead, new lead, new lead, new lead. And I opened it up and I scrolled through. And like in that moment, I knew that we had something. Like if I could do this, I knew if I could do it for him, I could do it for more people. And that was the birth of the new, I guess, our 2.0. So we still kept the name StreetText's, but it was going to be on Facebook ads. John had obviously been a big hand in making all that early technology and stuff work too. And we were just so excited. And then it was just hit the phones. So I started phoning all these different real estate agents that were existing clients of ours and pitching this new product to them. And it was strung together like it was as prototype as you could get. It was like literally, I had a Google sheet this was the product. It was a Google sheet that new leads would show up in, because I would use Zapier to like put these new leads in, and I'd run everything like
Oh,
on
no,
our
wait, no,
own.
Zapier didn't exist yet. So we were using
Oh, I thought it did.
no, no, Zapier didn't exist yet.
I'm trying to remember how I got the leads in there without Zapier. I'm
We
pretty
were
sure it
doing
did.
direct APIs to Google uh, through the application. So
Okay. Either way, we were able to get the leads into that sheet, and that was the product. And so every time you sign up another customer, it was great, but every time you wanted to make an update to the product, you had to go and do it customer by customer by customer, because there was no product. And we were under the guise of a software product, but there was no product. Because we were like agency at the the millionth degree, in the sense that we were running your ads, we set everything up, we were coming up with all the creative. We were just handing it to you in a silver platter in a sheet, but we were not charging you agency level prices. We didn't even know what an agency was at that point. And we were giving it to you not at software prices, but at we thought we started charging at $89 a month, which to us was a huge price, because we were charging $15 a month for our previous product. So we thought it was this huge price point. And but we were doing like literally $1,500 a month work at least for these customers, and giving it to them for $89. So the value was huge, but we had really no product, so it made sense. But anyway, so that was the beginning of what StreetText is today, and how that came about. And I mean, that's a whole nother story in itself, from 2014 to today. But that was kind of the origin, I guess.
well, do you remember? Uh, so this was even before you were working with that agent, um, who was, I believe, Daryl Reuter, who was our very first real estate client. In fact, he actually ended up like massively growing his business as a result of Facebook ads. Um, it was really cool to be a part of that. But before that, we were running ebook. Do you remember that? Where because we were thinking with Listing Leader, which is what we called it, the text for info solution. We're thinking, okay, we need a way of driving our own acquisition funnel. And the challenge we had was that it's really cool to grow from referrals, but it's really slow to grow from referrals. And so we were thinking, how do we increase the ability to acquire customers? And we were getting great referrals. We had people who were saying to us, "This is like, we love your company. It's so cool. You guys build such easy to use product." We're getting this really, really great feedback. We go to trade shows, we go to fairs, and we're building these cool relationships. But then, like, nobody was going to Google and searching, how do I get, text for info solutions? And so there wasn't the natural demand in the marketplace, because we were going out educating people. So we said, okay, what's going to create the demand? So we began testing ebooks, and we actually the ebook that had the most success at that time was, we had been running ads. I think we created our very first ad in 2012, and it was these side boxes basically. And so we created an ebook on how to create Facebook ads for yourself. And we began to run that first as an e-guide, then on as a Facebook ad. And I think in like 3 months, we had more people download that e-guide than we had like captured customers in the previous like 3 years prior combined. And so we're like, wow, there's so much demand for this. Maybe we should be thinking about creating a solution for that, which got the whole ball rolling. Which is it's the journey that you then went on to describe. That it's fascinating hearing from your perspective, because I remember from mine feeling all the same feelings. There's a part of me where I was like conflicting, right? Because you feel successful, you built something, but you also feel like a failure, because you feel like it's like it could just disappear, like it was all a facade, and I hate that feeling. I really don't like that feeling. I wanted to make sure that what we were building and what we were doing. But then the other side is, I saw so many incredible things, and we got to build these great relationships. And I remember, yeah, I could go. That's my story. So for you, um, what do you see as next? Like looking back now, fast forward a decade essentially, and what do you see the future of advertising? What do you think it's going to look like?
Great question. I just want to add one thing to what you just said because it actually happened last night. So as our month ended last night and I was looking at the revenue we brought in, I just kind of glanced over it. And then there was a small part of me that like went back to like that day, like early days. And I thought to myself, I can't believe I just glanced over this number. Like this is a number that was so beyond anything we could even have hoped for back then. You know what I mean? Like from a revenue standpoint. And it's not a small number. And when we were early days, I mean, if we could even have just done like I remember just dreaming like if we could do, the company could make $10,000 a month. You know, what could be possible if the company could do like 50,000 a month, right? Like in terms of revenue, you'd be like, all our problems would go away. You would think to yourself, imagine one day if it could do even more than that. Like, you know, and so it actually took me back a moment and just realizing how grateful I am of everything that we've done and the team that we have and what we're working on. And now we can take on bigger and bigger challenges and bigger opportunities, but also just a sense of what's possible when you stay the course and you're consistent. And you know, and it's, you know, John, like you know this, like our journey, I mean, in terms of years now in this business, we have been probably at like 13 years or what was it, 14? It's because like it's been a long time of like the whole journey. Like I forget exactly how many years it is in total, but
I think 14 maybe.
yeah, like it has not been a fast road for us in the sense like, you know, you hear these guys, they start a company and 3 years later they've sold it for like, you know, $300 million or whatever. Um, you know, that has just not been our journey, but I also wouldn't change anything from it. Like we have learned so much from it. And I think but it has not been a fast journey, but it's also a good reminder for anybody listening, like stay the course and keep building and keep going because you learn so much and your learning begins to compound even if you don't feel it. So looking forward for the next 10 years in the future of advertising, from this is just my perspective, and obviously John and I share a lot of this, but you know he can build on it in a big way. Is the future of advertising is going to be more fragmented than before, and so you know, for a while there, it was literally just like a couple players in the advertising world. You know, TikToks didn't exist, Pinterest didn't exist, like all that kind of stuff didn't exist. And it was pretty easy if you could just be on one or two platforms, you could get the majority. And that's still largely the case today, but it's becoming more fragmented than in the past. So you're gonna have more advertisers, you're gonna have more channels, you're gonna have more um, places that you need to be, and each of those channels is becoming quite complex. So even if you just want to advertise in Google, which has an enormous reach, or Facebook and Instagram has enormous reach, each of those platforms. So, an example like YouTube, you need specific ads, you need specific content, you need specific strategy. You need to, like, I kind of joke about it, but you literally needed, like, it doesn't have to be a long degree, but you need a degree in it to run it, to work it. And it's very different than PPC. It's very different than Facebook ads. It's very different than even how you're going to run certain content on Instagram or Instagram Reels. Like or TikTok. They're all different, right? And they all have their own way of basically tapping into the algorithm. They have their own way of like how to run ads or get return or ROI from your ads consistently, and how you need to be able to monitor and track that. So for a business owner, it's complex and hard, you know, and you got to kind of pick a channel. And if you get a pretty smart team, maybe you can take on two channels, or maybe you pay a lot for a pretty big agency and it can do all those things for you, or you string some tools together. StreetText has always set out to make that easy for a business owner and to make it so largely what our company has been doing and is going to continue to do is we aggregate a lot of the data. We look at what's working on the platforms, and then we give you templates that you can build on and work from, but that you just push a button and you get results. And that has been kind of like the name of the game for us. And we were very early on that. And obviously there's a lot of other companies that are trying it. But yeah, even when I see what they're doing, they're never doing it the way we're doing it. And I'm very proud of the way we're doing it. We made some hard decisions early on how we aggregate our data, how we have lead attribution, and how we keep that all consistent one-to-one. So touching on that, lead attribution has only got harder. You look at all the iOS 14 updates and what Apple's doing, and I mean, Apple's got its own game it's playing in that, and that was a great kind of like dig to Facebook, but it's changing the internet because obviously the internet's changing, Google's changing, any sort of third-party pixel data is changing. If you don't own that data, it's heavily changing. That's why you jump on every website and it's asking you if you can opt into the pixel, any sort of third-party pixel, and what they're using it for. Privacy is a big deal, and it should be because you need to know what you're doing. But the point is that the landscape is changing, and all of that has a huge impact on advertising. And where it has a huge impact is on visibility, right? So if you're spending $100 or $1,000 or $10,000, what ultimately are you generating from that spend? And that is way harder than you think. Like if you run one type of ad with one type of category in one type of channel, maybe you can get some visibility. But wait till you start trying a few more things and you try to run different advertising on different platforms. And you're hitting the same people, but you don't even know what you're hitting. And then you've got a website and you're driving trials. Try to figure out the attribution for every one of those channels and how they're performing. Also knowing that there is a synergy when they're playing together. So you have to account for that too. Not an easy task. It is much, much harder than you think. And so StreetText is really set out to solve that problem, to have that attribution. We can provide that attribution, but also make it a very simple platform that you can make advertising decisions on and actually get results from. And so I think the future is only going to get harder in the advertising side, but it's also going to become more powerful than ever. Like we have never seen the amount of companies that are starting on the internet today. And that's great. There are way more software companies that have ever existed. The traditional advertising mediums are basically dead. Like you still have TV today, but like if you think about where Ford is going to spend the majority of its advertising in the future, they see TV as a channel, but it's nothing like it was in the
No,
past.
it's gonna be YouTube. It's gonna be yeah.
Yeah. And so the point is that I think there was a time where though some of the big established players were still there and a lot of the big companies were there, and you didn't have as many companies that were leveraging a lot of the like the Facebooks and Instagrams. But that's noisier now, and now all the big players are on those platforms. They've been there for a while, but it's the digital play is only bigger and getting more fragmented. The amount of influences we have today is like the new world of like content creators, and like you want to be on their channels and get into their media, and they are eating up a bunch of the airtime, if you will. And then you've got like just a massive of like companies that are trying to become media companies. And so I would say it's going to become more important than ever that your content you're creating is being seen and that you're getting good attribution from it. But that the challenge there isn't going away. It is only increasing. And that's really what I see the future of is like, for the businesses that we work with, we can cut through that noise. We can get you to the right audience effectively and get a good return on that ad spend so you can grow your business. And then the other large side of that is that I think for a lot of businesses, they also underestimate the power of their database. They underestimate the relationships they already have that they already have, but they also forget or underestimate how many companies are advertising to their existing customers and going after the existing customers, and how important it is that they make sure that they keep that kind of foothold in that customer's mind, that they are the brand that you want to be working with long term. And that when the next transaction comes up, that they are the person you're thinking of. And so that's also a big part of what we do and what we've been specializing in, making sure that your brand is top of mind and front and center, because there's so much business in your database that I believe just gets missed all the time if you're not paying attention to that. So I guess that's kind of like, you know,
It's about being strategic in how you stay front and center of your database, and it's about owning
yeah,
that database because the channels are becoming fragmented, and the reality is people are spending their time 15 minutes here, 15 minutes there, 15 minutes here, 40 minutes in another platform, but they're spending their time across these different platforms. YouTube is a huge player. Facebook remains a huge player. Instagram keeps playing like Reels is become a big thing. Short forms on YouTube become a big thing. Short form on TikTok obviously is a big thing. But how do you create either content or brand advertising in a way that keeps you relevant on those platforms? And then those platforms have algorithms that are biased towards new, fresh content, which means if you don't have a content creating engine that is specifically crafted around call to actions, you're in real trouble. And you're talking about like, okay, we'll take that a step further and think about, well, what happens when the pixel's ending, or what happens when attribution is completely changed, so that it's all a black box again, back to the newspaper world. How do you compete? How do you stand out? And how do you do that as a business owner whose business depends on making sure that you are generating new relationships all the time? And then how do you do that at a high level so that you are not just getting a deal here or there, but you're actually building a business that creates the lifestyle that you dream of? And so this is becoming more and more challenging. And this is where I think both the opportunity, but also the reality is that it's challenging for us too as a technology provider, because we have to stay ahead of all these changes. And there's so much more our team has to be integrating and working on. So it gets incredibly expensive to support it, because you're not just supporting one API or one integration, you're supporting multiple APIs, multiple integrations, and you're not just supporting one format or one placement, you're supporting multiple formats, multiple placements on each of the different players. And then you have to come up with content that is new and working in those different channels, all that, and then bundled into an app experience that feels easy and streamlined and simple. It's an exciting challenge, but it's definitely a worthy challenge. It's not, yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting opportunity.
And just to kind of build on that a little bit, early days, I didn't realize that how important marketing is to the survival of your company. You know, Ultimately, you always want to build the best product. You always want to do, but it is also a true statement that second class products will beat a first class product with great marketing. In the sense of, the first class product may just be so focused on the product they forgot to ever get it out in front of their customers. And I think a lot of people hope that when you build something, the customers show up or they come, but you still have to find those early customers, or you got to get it out there. And there's many kind of like guerrilla style ways that exist today to do that. But once you've done that, you need to make sure that you can stand out and keep marketing. And it's all about communicating that message on an ongoing basis. That's why every company is so heavily focused on marketing. Apple's another great example. They build an incredible product, but what do they think about all the time was their messaging and their marketing, right? Like, because that's going to connect to the consumer, which is ultimately going to have an impact on the brand. Even though they got an incredibly great product, they had to make sure that the marketing was there. And I think a number of years ago, when it came to just like digital, I think it was maybe a little bit easier to find products. Could be wrong, but I felt like it was like but there's more now than ever before. And a book came out called Predictable Revenue years ago. And on that book, obviously, it was really about like an outbound email strategy to grow your business. And to what you were saying there, John, as well, I totally agree. Like, you need to be, you need to be standing out, because we realized with predictable revenue, we thought, okay, some businesses can grow just through referrals and some can grow through an outbound strategy. But I think today you have to have an advertising arm or marketing arm, like, and it's the same, to be able to get to your customers, because all your customers are being advertised to, whether you're advertising to them or not. You need to make sure that you have a predictable strategy of driving new customers to your business. It is the fastest way to grow. Real estate's a great example of that, because I remember early days, a lot of realtors, and sometimes they might still say it, but not as much anymore. They would say, "Oh, I don't spend $1 in advertising. I just grow through referral." The fastest way to grow your real estate business, all the big teams do this, is through advertising. Because every time you bring in a new customer, you generate a customer that can become a referral for the future. But if you didn't advertise for that new customer, you wouldn't get them. Somebody else would get them. And so you're going to lose out on those referrals. So to grow through referrals basically means you have a set of customers and you're hoping you're going to grow, but you have no predictability on that. Where when you have a strong marketing and advertising arm, you can actually grow predictably.
But
Like you
here's
can,
the other thing on that, I think, which is really like this whole podcast is about growing profitably. And the thing that uh, people don't realize is that through paid advertising, it's an incredibly powerful way of growing profitably because you get a tangible ROI. For most businesses, so we're in the tech space, so we understand. We go to the conferences and we go to, like, if you get a 2 to 4x ROI, that's considered like amazing. In fact, if you get over a 4x ROI, the it's you're supposed to be spending more money on advertising at that point and bring your ROI down, because what means is that you're leaving money on the table. You're not actually maximizing your growth trajectory. For most service businesses, especially in like the real estate space, like the average is a 15x ROI on our platform. 15x. That means like every dollar they're spending in real advertising, it's $15 in return. That's super fast and profitable way of growing. But here's the kicker, and I think this is the part that really needs to like make sense, is that now say you get somebody and you turned it into 15x ROI, get one referral from that person, you've just doubled your ROAS. You've doubled your return on ad spend. You've doubled your return on your investment. And so the agents that we've worked with that have actually thrived the best on advertising, the ones that are the best aren't the ones who are like very transactional. It's the ones who are really good at referrals and they understand the importance of advertising. And so they go and they advertise, but then they're creating relationships that are quality relationships with their clients, and they're just blowing up their businesses as a result. And that's the key. I think people just don't understand. Like they think it's like either it's like I spend money or I save money. It's like, well, no, it's about making sure that you're spending money accountably so that you can measurably see the ROI and invest in a business for the long term that's creating value for your customer. So much so that they are telling their friends and their family and their sphere that they need to work with you. And so because you're serving them just to that level.
yeah, it's very true. And I was even just thinking as you're saying that, like, I think human nature is, because it's so true. Like our average customer would get at least 15x, not accounting the referrals. But because the nature, traditionally, a lot of our clients are in the real estate, like because of the nature of the fact that that client might not show up for 3 months or 6 months, they would actually, many of them would probably take a 1.5 return if they could get it immediately and there was no risk. You know what I mean? But you could do it in like 7 days or 4 days or 5 days or whatever. What they don't realize is that it's so much greater if you can just wait a little longer, in the sense of, if there was no risk, everybody would do it, and you would make nothing, if that makes sense, because it would just be so crazy. Like, it's the very fact that there's some time delay, and that time delay is the human nature component that is gonna get most people out of it. They're gonna panic and they're not gonna do anything, or they're gonna feel like, oh, I'm generating these leads and I haven't generated any business from it. Like, I gotta stop. And they stop. And where the other, obviously those that know what they're doing and they've got that little bit, and maybe they've seen it through and they probably just witnessed it. But once they have that confidence, they grow so fast and they make so much
I have
revenue out of it.
a great story I heard yesterday that just blew my mind. So there's an oil and gas trader, and I don't know if you like. So oil and gas traders, they it's very hard to get into, but if you get into it, you can do very well. And he had shorted natural gas, and this was at the start of the the COVID pandemic, and all of a sudden, like oil shutting down, and basically he lost $60 million in less than 1 month.
But he was shorting it. I would have thought that he would have been making money.
No, he
Was
was
it all?
shorting it. So basically the reality was is his position was going the opposite. He was counting on it to go to zero and natural gas was starting to climb. And so
Oh, so it was just basically oil that went to zero.
yes.
'Cause oil went like to a point where you were almost having to pay money to have it. Like in
Yes.
other words, it was going opposite. So, but
So
natural gas
he
was
had
not.
made the wrong prediction
Oh my.
because he did not foresee COVID. He didn't expect that to happen. And so in less than 1 month he loses $60 million. And what would most people do in that scenario? Most people would panic. They'd you know, um, but he looked at that and like that was a huge loss for him, significant. And what he decided to do in that moment is he stepped back and he kind of looked at his problem and thought, okay, well, if this is the reality, if this is the new direction, because it's all based on predictions, you just have no idea what the future holds. It's always easy to look back in time and say, oh yeah, that makes sense, he was so smart. But he was like, okay, I'm actually going to double down on natural gas. I think natural gas is going to go up. Well, we know based on what happened, natural gas exploded, and so he ended up 5xing his money over the the next 6 months, and he made it all back and then some significantly. He made a quite a bit back, and the reality there, he said, is that the challenge is that most people they struggle in his career because they won't go through that transition period. They stress when they're at the when they're at a high, and they stress even more when they're at a low. And so then that kind of unfolds. Excuse me. So the reality there is what you were talking about, is that not everybody is winning like that because not everybody's willing to go through the transition period where you can't see the result yet, because that's the scariest part. It's like people say trust the process, but when you're the one who's leading the process, you're like, I have nothing to base it on. And so you just have to have that resolve of that knowledge in your gut, or the ability to make change your play in the middle of it, and actually take a totally different decision, so that you stay long enough to see the fruit of the effort. And I think that was really the takeaway I got from when I was listening to that guy. I was like, wow, there's something really um, profound there, and you're touching on the same thing. Otherwise, everyone would be doing it. So
Yeah, I mean, what do they say? One of the greatest. When people are looking for, it's like not confidence, it's security, like assurance. Like it's like one of the biggest human needs is security or assurance, right? It's which is the opposite of risk. It's like a sense of um, predictability in all things. Like, and we all like that. I mean, that would be very nice. So like, I feel that too. You know, as much as I can take risks and things, it'd be nice to know like it's guaranteed, right? Like whatever is guaranteed. And when and business just isn't that. There's a huge amount of risk, and obviously if you're investing, there's enormous amounts of risk and all of those things. But there's risk in really everything in life, but there's also risk in not doing things in life too, and you got to account for that. But when you and that's I think that special part, kind of we're touching back to the AI thing a little bit with the human component, which is humans have this ability that when they have resolve and they have a vision and they see something, they can literally bend space, time, and matter if your resolve is strong enough to see that vision come to light. And I think that, for anybody listening, and if our clients that are listening, or, whatever you're working on and doing, like you're capable of so much when you're talking about that, going through that transition period or whatever else, or that gap, if you can continue to hold that resolve and see it through. I mean, obviously, there's so many entrepreneurs, but when I look at a guy like Elon Musk, like he has that obviously as a rare capacity, like like, and we don't need to get into that story, but when you're taking on those particular challenges, like SpaceX is an example of that, like that is next level beyond next level in my mind of seeing stuff come through. But everybody has that, and you even have it in your small things in life. And so just wherever, just exercise that muscle, I guess is my point. Like when you see something in life that you want, and maybe it's something that's just like a personal thing, or it may a fitness goal that you feel like is impossible, see yourself on the other side of that, being that person, becoming that person that is that fitness goal in your mind, and watch what that'll do to you and how that'll transform you when you actually accomplish it, right? Because it's that it seems so impossible, but once you hit it and you get there, it doesn't necessarily mean you'll have this drive at the end. I think that's something I've noticed too, is like you like your what's the word I'm looking for? Like inspiration or ambition or whatever that actually comes from action. Like you're much more likely to get that from action. Like don't expect the drive to just be there at the end either. Like you have to constantly, you're always climbing the mountain, if that makes sense. But you will build a faith inside of yourself that is, you can't put money on it. Like once you start to see it, I mean, like if Elon Musk lost everything, he could still do things that nobody could do again. And he would do them faster than anybody could do them again, if that makes sense. Just because he has something inside of him that you can't put money on anymore. And John, we've been through challenges in our business that are so big that our team, especially like we have a lot of our team that has been with us right from many, many years ago, and they've seen us go through things that we don't even know how we solved them. Like you literally couldn't even have solved them, some of those problems, and yet they were solved. And so it builds that like confidence and faith. And so even for a client, if you're day one using StreetText and you're generating leads and you wanted to become successful in the business and you feel like this is really hard, A, it's worth it. B, hard, this is the make or break moment where most people, the development of those skills is so critical to your business regardless in the future. It is so worth it. Don't lose faith in it. And once you've come through and got to the other side, what else is possible?
Yeah, and take a moment to recognize exactly what you talked about earlier, where you said just recognize that the where you are today would blow the mind of your younger self. And so take a moment to recognize that, because sometimes when we've accomplished things, we see the next mountain and we're comparing where we are not to where we came from, but we're comparing ourselves to where we want to be in the future. And it always looks hard when you're standing at the bottom of a mountain looking up. And so that perspective is so powerful. So Steve, um, I've totally enjoyed this. This has been like a really cool, fun podcast. This has been a great session. I love this conversation. Uh, what's one thing that you'd want to leave whoever's listening to this to with?
Well, maybe I already said it, just a few minutes ago, like a few seconds ago, because I think what I would want to leave people with is, life. Like I don't know who, or people say like life's about being happy, or and I think what a lot of people almost kind of contrive from that sometimes is life is supposed to be easy. And life is not supposed to. I really don't think it's supposed to be easy. I actually think it's supposed to be challenging, because it is challenging. Like life has a lot of challenges to it. It doesn't matter. The challenges come small and big in all different shapes and forms. But it's who you become as a result of those challenges, and then how you can shine your light to inspire others, right? And so even something that you're going through, that you're facing in your life today, and maybe it's learning how to just convert online leads. It may seem like a trivial thing or a hard thing or whatever else, but what that'll mean to you, what that'll mean to people watching you as you go through that, what that'll mean to your family in the future, like it's worthy challenges. Like look at every single thing in your life, like every obstacle in your life. Like we often say, every obstacle is an opportunity. On the other side of that obstacle is an opportunity, especially because a lot of people don't go through those obstacles. And so there can sometimes be massive opportunity on the other side of them, right? Like get back to Elon Musk, like electric cars, huge opportunity, huge obstacle. He got through it, huge opportunity, right? And now everybody's there, but you get the idea. And so I would just say that for every single, be it a challenge or an opportunity, there's obstacles within those things. And embrace the fact that like life is climbing a mountain, but it's so worth the reward. But more than even that, like you have no idea who's watching. Like, you'd be amazed at all of the eyes on you that are watching and what that'll mean to their life. And so that's, I guess, my kind of what I'd leave you with is just continue, keep going, keep doing the hard work, keep pushing on, because your life matters, and the obstacles you face actually matter more than even for you, but for the greater good of all.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
I love that. Stephen, thank you so much. I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I hope whoever's listening really like there's something here that you can take away and implement. And as our friend Dan says, it's what's caught, not taught. And I feel like there's a lot of things in this conversation that are worth catching and implementing. So thank you so much. I really appreciate this. This has been a lot of fun.
It has been, man. I actually, just being on this call with you today, obviously I hope to do more of these things, but this is great. This is fun. I feel like this is, even for us, just for you and me, for our journey, everything we've got to get here, even the fact that we're doing this together. This is another part of what it's all about. And so I feel very honored to have you as a business partner and to go through all the things we've gone through together in all the years together. And yeah, I just feel super honored. So thanks, John, for doing this. Let's go.